But just like the U.S. senators following their intelligence briefing in a skiff just a few days ago, it feels like we've got more questions than answers. Now, our next guest is a former Air Force commander and a new senior advisor to Polaris National Security. She is Jennifer-Ruth Green. Jennifer-Ruth, it's great to have you back. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. It's an honor. I appreciate being back here tonight. You guys do amazing work, and I'm glad to be a small part tonight.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And you do amazing work. And so I would love to hear your opinion on that press conference that President Biden gave earlier today. There were a lot of words spoken, but it didn't feel to me like we could really glean anything new from it. But what's your perspective on it?
No, I think you're absolutely right. The president gave too little too late. The last, UAP was shot down on Sunday. It's 4 days later. And so here we are having some information relayed to us. But really the ultimate question that we all have is the fact that for, the 65-year history of NORAD, they have never shot anything down, despite the fact that, during that time, they've found 171 of these specific UAPs, UFOs, and we never shot any of them down. However, now in the last 2 weeks, we've shot down 4, the first of which we know definitively was Chinese, but yet we have no answers and we have more questions than answers. And so we need more than this information that the president provided in this address.
Yeah, a lot of people saying that, Jennifer-Ruth, was not a good press conference. You can see the reporters were even frustrated at the end trying to get some questions in because he didn't answer anything. I want to take you to one thing he said, because you served in the military and this doesn't add up to me. So he said he chose not to shoot the Chinese spy balloon down until it got over water because he's afraid that debris would fall on Americans. But then they shot 3 other ones over the interior of the country, not having the same concern. There seems to be a very big disconnect in that explanation. Your thoughts as a former member of the military?
I think the disconnect with the current administration is not necessarily the words and the cleanup that they continue to have to find after the president says things that either he doesn't mean or weren't supposed to be interpreted in the way that they were said, or actions that were, quote, taken out of context. But the reality is we have an administration that does not take China seriously. And so I believe firmly that this was a test of our security. It was a test of our will. It's to see whether or not we're going to stand up and confront the administration for the things that they're doing. And so now that there's all of a sudden a lot of public exposure to this particular event, now there has to be action, or more rather a reaction. And so when I think about the fact that China is building up their nuclear stockpile, specifically the Pentagon talks about how by 2035, the entirety of it will triple. And I believe that these particular UAPs are over our land, looking to see our nuclear stockpiles, where they are, how we respond, and what's happening with those particular pieces. I firmly believe that they're evaluating our strength and ultimately seeing great weakness from this administration. You're absolutely right. We could have gone to Montana, moved some people out of a rural area, or planned it and timed it. But this balloon, specifically that they shot down and waited for to shoot down over the Atlantic, had the opportunity to traverse all the way from Alaska, all the way to the Atlantic. And it is just a lack of responsibility on this administration's part in taking China seriously, which is a huge foul.
Indeed.
Yeah. Flying cartographers, it's like they're just mapping out our entire country, including sensitive areas. I wanted to ask you this. This administration continues to assert the notion that we are in competition with China, not in conflict. You, throughout your service in the military and now with Polaris National Security, do you find that to be the case?
I saw that quote from the vice president, and they don't want to start conflict with China. But can I just tell you, China is already at war with us. They use information warfare. They may not be using kinetic attacks, but I can tell you they are very active in space. They are very active in growing. And it seems as if there's a Cold War that only they are participating in. And we are falling behind very rapidly on the technology space. We are falling very behind rapidly because China measures their time in decades, in dynasties. And we look at our stopwatch. And China does not care about the things that we do on a day-to-day basis. They care about 100 years from now. And so they will sit patiently and wait and observe. But this administration continues to show great weakness. And it is a very frustrating piece for those of us who have the opportunity to be concerned and engaged with national security, because they must recognize and realize that China is not our friend. once that particular piece is ingrained in people's minds, they will conduct themselves in a very different way. And we see clearly that this administration doesn't get it.
Man. I want to ask about one thing, because one of the places where we now know from the United States Intelligence Committee in open source, saying this aloud, is that China uses TikTok both to feed information that's propaganda and dangerous to our children, and then to capture our biometrics for future use in whatever they're going to use it for. And yet many Democrats, including President Biden, continue to use TikTok today, despite all the warnings of the Intelligence Committee, despite several states banning it from their devices now. The mixed message that Joe Biden uses every time he or another Democrat goes back on TikTok, concerning to you?
Absolutely. You know, in Indiana specifically, our Attorney General, Todd Rokita, he is very vocal about this. And Senator Tom Cotton, very vocal about this as well. They just say you would not allow a Chinese spy to sit inside your house and figure out what's going on. However, every day you allow that with TikTok. And you know what I think? We need leaders to lead. We need consistency from the top, and we need to have a unifying message to be able to protect the country and the people across the country. But again, when you don't see the gravity of the responsibility to hold China accountable, to take care of our people, to have unity around a message, then you see weakness. And that's what we continue to see out of this administration. And it's quite frustrating.
Well said.
Jennifer-Ruth, I wanted to kind of ask you a broader, a little bit political question. I guess it's actually overtly political. In the 70s, 60s and 70s in America, you had a lot of anti-war activists, and I would say probably 99% of them fell in the Democrat column. But it seems like things have shifted. In our modern era, who do you think is the pro-war party now?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. You know, I can speak as a military member that I am a proponent of peace and peace through strength. But when I think about the current Democrat Party, and specifically the fact that they want to threaten to cut the funding of our defense budget and things like that, the reality of that is very scary, because we have peer competitors. We have Russia, we have China, we have Putin, who has invaded Ukraine, and we see clearly we're coming up on that 1-year anniversary, which is why the VP is in Munich. Right. And we see the reality of those situations, but ultimately what we don't see is a fair response to them. And so when I think about who is pro-war, I hope nobody's pro-war, but I do hope that people are pro-defending America and pro-making sure that we can have our objectives across the world.